We have to be able to build these relationships because these people can help us. Sometimes people have to hear it said by a different person.
It's very important that you have clear roles and that individuals understand what their responsibilities are within your program, right? As you scale, it's going to introduce more tasks, tools, and processes. And it's also going to require more specialized roles within that GRC department, because at the end, you don't want to have someone who wants to take this SOC 2 audit and lead it, and it just gets handed off to a person who has no clue what they're doing. So there needs to be clear defined roles. There needs to be proper training so that we are able to scale. GRC touches your entire organization. And it could be HR doing background checks. Are they doing performance reviews, which is part of a SOC 2 audit, right? So it's everybody. We need to make sure that the people doing policies and procedures are also involved in this as well. What about the marketing department that's reaching out to vendors because they want to house and store more data and be able to make better sales because they're understanding more about their potential clients, right? Well, that's new data that we're now bringing in-house or bringing into our cloud or what have you. So even the marketing team needs to be involved in those processes as well. Stakeholder management. It all comes down to, if someone were to ask me, what's the most important thing in GRC? I'm going to say that it's relationship, right? Forming relationships is the most important thing, because if we don't have clear communication, but we haven't established relationships with the people that we need to, it's going to be hard to get those tasks done. So if we're asking our peers or our coworkers, and we're giving them goals, there has to be buy-in from leadership so that the people who have their defined roles and responsibilities, so that to ensure that they get those things done. The other thing, as far as tailoring your message, we need to be able to speak to our audience, right? We have to be able to read the room. What I mean by that is, if you're sitting in a conference, you're having a conversation with a technical team, go all out, right? Talk technical, geek out and get things done. However, if I'm in a room with 3 technical people and I have 2 people from leadership, well, now I have to do a good job of making sure that they feel included in the conversation and not talk in a language that excludes them from that. Because in the end, we want them to understand what we're talking about so that they can make good knowledge-based decisions off of that. So we have to know our audience. And the last thing is enablement of IT sales and functions, right? Aligning GRC with the business goals. And I'll give you an example here. If you have a business that has never taken a credit card, but I all of a sudden want to implement the PCI standards, that might not align with the business goals. Maybe I could look at a SOC 2 audit, right? And align things there so that I'm doing things that align to, to a framework, or that I have specific controls in place, but there's no credit card data to protect. So why are we doing things and spending money and resources on things that maybe don't need to be done, right? So we need to make sure that it aligns with our goals as well, because our goal is to enable business, not to obstruct business. And many times, people in our industry, us tech people, we have a hard time communicating in a way that enables a business. They see us sometimes as showstoppers, where we just want to hold up and stop everything and cause them from doing business. So we need to make sure that we're on their same team, which is also why we need to make sure that we understand technology, but understand the business as well. Have some business acumen, understand what's important to the business, what's a risk to the business, and so on. Jacob, feel free to add anything to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I have a few thoughts that I'll share. When I was in government, I saw this a lot. People would ask cybersecurity people something, and they would just say no. But it was because they didn't know. But they just said, I'm going to assume the answer is no. I would definitely advise against that, because going back to the stakeholder management and building relationships, number one, your key stakeholders have to be able to trust you, right? And so you have to show that you're an honest person, and that I feel like it's much better to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to find out for you. I've done that all throughout my career. And right there, that is a builder of trust. You might have the random jerk out there that thinks you should know everything. Mike, you posted about that the other day. But, I think a lot of people will just say, all right, I understand. Come back to me when you have an answer. And then you can go back to your research, because there is so much to know. You can't know it all. Oh, well, and then also going back to stakeholders, we have to be able to build these relationships because these people can help us. Sometimes people have to hear it said by a different person, but it's the same thing you've been saying, but they just got to hear it from a different person. And so that can be frustrating, but that's how it works sometimes. So, manage those relationships and build them. And I think that'll lead to success.
I totally agree with you there.
I had a gentleman on by the name of Kenneth Morris on the podcast, and I highly recommend checking that out as well. We talked about mastering GRC and building effective teams. So I'm going to take some of his tips that he shared with me and share them with you also. He mentioned a few types of people or a few characteristics that he wants to have in GRC teams. And I'll go through them. One was a curious type of person, a person that will, in his words, challenge the status quo, right? Why do we have to do this? With security controls, there could be 100,000 ways to implement them. And it's all dependent on the threshold of risk involved, the sensitivity of the data, so there is all kinds of different ways to address these problems, these controls. And I can tell you in my career, I've had some pretty big discoveries on that's been a big benefit to my organization just by being curious, just by digging a little bit deeper than, maybe the normal person, maybe they would have stopped at this level, but I'm like, that doesn't sound right. So let's dig a little deeper, So I think having someone on the team like that is definitely critical. Another piece he said was data analytics, having someone who can do that work. Because in his words, he said that making decisions based on intuition, that can work, right? But we have data sets. We have historical data that we can look back on and make decisions based off of those. And when you're talking about a big tech situation, a big data situation, those data points are critical. So having someone who can help with that as well. And this is something that I really appreciated, having an evangelist on your team that can go out and spread the good word about your GRC program. We can't operate on an island. We have to go out. We have to integrate into business processes. If we're just doing our GRC program and creating policies, processes, but nobody ever looks at them ever again, it's no good. Right. So you have to have that evangelist type role to help often remind people that here's our processes, here's our policies, because you know how people are. There's all kinds of people. Some of them are security minded, some of them are not. So you have to deal with all types. And the evangelist is critical to that piece. And then I'll add also project management, because in a GRC program, there are all kinds of tasks and it can become overwhelming. Right. So having someone to actually manage those tasks, to keep an eye on how it's progressing or how things are not progressing and what are the priorities.
Yeah, I'll just tune in on that. The project management piece, you're exactly right. So as an example, I manage the SOC 2 audit for our company that I work for. And there's not one person that's involved that's not more important than the other, right? Because in the end, when you're going through an audit, and whether it's SOC 2, whether it's PCI, what CMMC, whatever it is, everything has to be done. It could take one person just falling through and not doing their task to make you non-compliant, right? You have to be a leader there. And that's where I go back to the relationship piece, having the relationships with the people that you depend on to get these things done. And this comes down to everybody, right? HR, just everybody. So you're exactly right. You have to have the project management piece. You have to be patient, but at the same time, you still have to be able to have the ability to nudge people in a way to have them do what that's expected of them as well.
Yeah, sometimes that which does not get done actually goes to a boiling point. And if you're not tracking all of those things, it can come back to bite you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Much of GRC is about us, is about people, right? We can't automate people as much as we wish we could. I can't, PowerShell script myself and not yet. We have to have these policies and processes in place. Like an example might be, supply chain security and making sure that you're buying from approved sources. That's a whole nother field in itself. I put out this post a while ago about this person who had a bunch of eBay and Amazon storefronts, and it was like a multi-million-dollar operation operation. He was getting these quote unquote Cisco devices that came from China, and they were counterfeit, right? And who knows what goodies were put in by the time the end user bought them. So they were like, man, I saved a lot of money on this, but who knows what they brought into their network. Supply chain security is critical, but you can't automate that. You got to make sure that you're buying through approved sources. And going back to my other point, we can't be an island and succeed. We have to integrate into the business processes. So you're going to have to work with all kinds of stakeholders, build those relationships. And that's a critical piece.
Absolutely. Great points.
Hey, folks, hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe and then check out this video.